Hey everyone, I'm back, and today I'm going to talk about Volume 5 of Dating Sim. Um, Before I get into Volume 5, just real quick, um, currently there's only 5 official English translated volumes, and that's all I'm going to go over right now. I'll go over each volume as they come out. Volume 6 should be out in about a week or two. I'll talk about Volume 6 then when it comes out, but I'm only going to do official releases that come out in English. Now, when it comes to side stories and stuff, I will talk about them, but I'll do them in its own separate video rather than like each whatever volume the side story comes out. I'll talk about it in that same video as the volume. I'll do a whole separate video for side stories on a certain series. In this case, this novel, there's side stories that aren't published with the English version, but I will go over them. That's gonna be the next video that I do. I'm gonna do the side stories based up until volume 5. I won't go any further than that. Um, so the next video will be the side stories for Dating Sim, and then after that, I'm gonna move on to the combatants will be dispatched. That'll be my next series I talk about. But I just wanted to clarify that. So yeah, the next video will be the side stories. Like I said, I will do side stories for every whatever novel I'm reading. If I can get whatever side stories for that novel, I will do that as a separate video, as on its own. And I'll talk about the side stories then. Um, so yeah, volume 5. Volume 5 more or less starts off with Leon and everybody getting back into the normal groove of everything after everything that happened in volume 4 with Pierre. Um, they're now Leon and the whole crew, Leon, Marie, um, the prince and the other boys, Carla, Noel, Jean, everybody who more or less missed out on school because of what happened in the previous volume with Pierre. They're more or less catching back up to everything that they missed out. At this point, Marie and everyone else notices that Noel has a crush on Leon, but Marie decides not to tell Leon, and she decides not to tell Noel about Leon having fiancés. More or less, she became good friends with Noel Marie, and she doesn't really want to let her get hurt over the fact that with Leon. So, like I said, everything's going back to normal, and at this point, we go back to Angelica and Olivia. Um, with everything that happened in Volume 4, Leon was before that sending them constant, messages and finding out how everyone's doing. Um, After Pierre more or less stole Leon's airship and his armor and everything, the messages between Leon and the girls started, more or less. It was a lot harder. Leon started sending handwritten letters to Angelica and Olivia, and that would take more time than the emails that he used to send them. But more or less, the communication between the two sides, more or less, it kind of stopped for a while. And Angelica and Olivia were more or less worried about what's going on with Leon. So Claire, if you remember, Claire being the other robot that's like Luxion, she more or less tells Olivia and Angelica that she can more or less hack into Luxion and find out what's going on with Leon. So she does that, and when she does that, she more or less hears something from Luxion that kind of paints Leon as a cheater, that he's more or less cheating on Angelica and Olivia. He's more or less two-timing. So Angelica and Olivia get worried about what's going on, and at this point, they're on break themselves. So they get all their work done, and they hurry off to the Alza Republic to go check up on Leon. So they make their way over there, and more or less, they make their way over there on another ship that Claire more or less made from the spare parts of the Einhorn. It's another ship that's pretty much similar to the Einhorn. They make their way over there, and more or less, Luxian informs Leon that they're on their way. So at this point, Leon is still staying at Marie's place after everything that happened in Volume 4. Um, so he goes off to go meet Angelica and Olivia at the port. So as after he left during this time, Noel more or less gets the crest of the priestess. Now, if you remember from previous volume, I told you, sorry, Leon more or less got the Guardian's crest. So at this point, Noelle is happy that she got the Priestess crest, but she also wishes that Leon gets the Guardian's crest. She didn't know that Leon already had the Guardian's crest, and really the only people that knows about the crest being on Leon, Leon, Marie, and Lelia, Noelle's sister. If you remember, I told you Lelia was also like Leon and Marie. She was a reincarnated person. Um, at this point, they're the only three that knows about Leon having the Guardian's crest, and like I said, Noel more or less gaining the priestess crest. Um, there's a certain hierarchy to the crest in the Outer Republic. The priestess crest being the highest crest, and then the guardian's crest, and then the other houses. Um, so yeah, she gains the priestess crest, and she's on her way to tell Leon and everybody that she has the crest. And at this point, she was already kind of on her way to going back to her house after everything that happened. It's safe now. She can go back to living with her sister. So as she's on her way down, Leon just comes back from picking up Angelica and Olivia from the port. So at this point now, Noelle finds out about Leon having two fiancés, and she's pretty hurt after everything because she, like I said, she has a crush on Leon at this point, and she realizes he already has two fiancés, and she doesn't want to get between that. So she acts like everything's normal, and she leaves Marie's estate. At this point, she, like I said, she's really sad. She runs back home. She more or less holds up in her room. So back to Angelica and Olivia. Like I said, they came to the Outer Republic to more or less check up on Leon and see how everything's going. But they also was supposed to bring him back to Halford. The king has summoned him. So that happens. They go back to Halford, and more or less Leon straightens up everything between what happened. He lets everyone knows about what happened with Pierre and the Republic. He informs the king and everybody, and he also straightens up the whole accusation of him cheating on Noel and no, I'm sorry, not Noel, cheating on Angelica and Olivia. So more or less, they decide to send back two people with him back to the Outer Republic. From his family side, they decided on sending Eumeria. If you remember, I said Eumeria was Kyle. Kyle being Marie's slave. That's his mother. Remember, she started working for Leon as a maid. She takes care of his family and whatnot. So his father decides to send Eumeria back with Leon for two reasons. More or less, like I said, to keep an eye on Leon, make sure he's not doing anything wrong, and so that she can see her son again, being Kyle. It's more or less like a reward for everything that she's done so far. So they decide to send her back, and she can be with her son for the time being. And then from Angelica's family side, they decide to send one of their top maids, Cordelia. Um, she's also nobility, and she more or less grew up with Angelica. She started as a maid there from a very young age, and she's more or less she's taking care of Angelica. She's pretty fond of Angelica, and she doesn't want what happened with Julius and Angelica to happen with Leon. More or less, that's what nobody wants to happen again. They don't want um there to be trouble again like that. So they decide to send those two maids back with Leon. So while all of that is happening back in Holford, back in Alpha now, um, we get back to Marie and the boys. More or less, before Leon left, he left Marie with a whole bunch of money so that she can take care of everybody. Herself, the five boys, Carla, Kyle, that they have money that they can actually live off of while he's gone. Because, the state of Marie and the boys, they're always in more or less broke because of how the boys are. So, more or less, Marie hides away the money, but the boys end up finding it. And when they do, they end up spending all of it on a whole bunch of bouquets for Marie. Now, Marie gets pissed off at this point because now they have no money, and how what are they supposed to do? All the money that Leon Wallace gave them to live off of while he's gone, the boys squandered it away. So, all right, Marie gets pissed off. She kicks the boys out, and she tells them they have 2 weeks to learn more or less the value of money. She kicks them out so that they can make their own money and more or less learn how to be a normal person because their view of money, because they came from such high profile families and whatnot, their view of money and the amount that they use, they don't realize that they're using a lot of money. So she kicks them out, and more or less they all find something that they can do. um, the prince had the hardest time because more or less he kept going to places and explaining that he's a prince, and they're not gonna hire a prince to do menial labor, regardless of where he's from. So the prince had the hardest time, and what little bit of money that each of them had, he was the one that was almost pretty much broke at that point. After like a few days, he more or less spent it all just staying at whatever hotel he was staying at and whatnot. Um, he more or less meets up with the other boys and he realizes that they all found something that they can do. And at this point, he's now panicking because he had already decided he'd just go crawling back and apologize, and he thought the other boys was gonna do the same, but they all actually ended up finding something to do. So he ends up finding his own thing. Um, More or less, he was working at a food stand, barbecue, whatever, and that's what he ended up doing for those 2 weeks. So, all right, we cut back to Noel, and if you remember from the previous volume, the main capture target, Loic, he has been after Noel from since since we met her, more or less. So he goes and he finds out Noel is back at her house, and Noel at this point she more or less decides to try and cheer herself up. She goes outside to go do whatever, just to try and get over Leon for a bit after finding out about the two fiancés. So um, at this point, Loic more or less he finds out that she has the crest on her hand, the priestess crest. So Noel was trying her hardest, like I said, to hide the fact, because Noel was more or less a survivor from the seventh house. Seventh house being the Lebanese house, and she has the priestess crest. So Lloyd kind of uses that to his advantage on trying to actually get Noel. So he leaves her alone for that day, but he comes back later on. More or less at this point, Marie has been keeping an eye on Noel because she more or less found out about everything that's going on, and she keeps an eye on her with Claire because Claire stayed behind. Um, Now she's keeping an eye on Noel. She's kind of trying to protect her from Loic. But after everything that happened, Loic more or less um, he tells his father about Noel and the crest and whatnot, and that she's the priestess, and that he's gonna take her as a bride because that's his whole target is Noel. So at this point, we find out that Louise again, is the villainess of the second game. She herself is getting married to one of the other houses, so to House Burial. So more or less, Loic convinces Luis's um, fiance's brother that you know it'll be in his advantage if he helps him out to get Noel to marry him because the current Archduke, which would be Luis's father, he's not doing anything properly for the Republic, and he's making the Republic kind of look bad, and everything is in his own interest. So he knew he could take advantage of that because um, House Burial, they have a really strong feeling of for the Republic, and the way things were recently going with how Leon and everything was, he knew he could take advantage of that. So he got them on more or less his side, and you know from there, Loic was able to more or less go get Noel. So he took Noel. He came, and he more or less, in order to take Noel away, he kind of threatened her in the sense that knowing that even though she doesn't want to go with him, she would have to go with him because he, he more or less understands Noel's personality and how she is. So he more or less put his life and the life of everybody else because he knows that Leon wouldn't stand, for you know for her just going with him, and he chose a time when Leon wasn't there to actually go and get her. So she ends up deciding that it's best to sacrifice herself for everybody else in the Republic, and she ends up going with him. And Marie can't stop what's going on right now. So Leon finally makes it back to the Outer Republic, and more or less, um, Marie fills him in on what happened, and with the Noel and whatnot, that she got the priestess curse and everything. So Leon decides, okay, I'm gonna go rescue Noel. So he does that, and when he does that, Luxion more or less made him like this whole camel thing that he sneaks into Loic's estate. Now, before he snuck in, what happened with Noel was after she got captured by Loic, he ended up putting a collar on her. Now, if you remember, I did mention before that he's been trying to put this collar on her for a long time now. Now, the thing with this collar is that for anybody that played the game, the second game, they know that him putting a collar on Noel more or less leads to the bad end. And more or less the sister, Lelia, um, she got more or less tricked by Loic in the sense that Loic, um, he passed himself off as, he's not the same as he was before. He's not as obsessive and whatnot. Now, like I said, he aligned himself with House Burial, and he got support from Lelia. Like I said, he tricked everybody into thinking he's not as obsessive and more or less a bad person. So at this point, yeah, he Loic puts the collar on Noel, and the collar is attached to a bracelet that he puts on himself. That collar, more or less, it makes it so that Noelle can't run away from him. And even if she does run away from him, the collar will instantly bring her back to Lloyd. So more or less, Noelle is more or less trapped now, and she can't do anything. So yeah, he's pretty abusive. He beats on Noelle quite a bit, and his whole mental state is like it's really bad. Like he'll beat on Noelle in 1 second, and then in the next second he'll be all nice and be like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this, but because you blah 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 blah, you did whatever, and then he's pretty harsh to Noelle. So Leon comes in, he tries to save her, and he gets to her room, he knocks out the guards, whatever, but Noelle tells him to go back. More or less, she wants Leon to save her. She's happy that he did come to save her, but she feels like this is something she has to put herself through. She's, like I said, she's sacrificing herself for everybody else. So she sends Leon away, and at this point, Leon is pissed. He's upset because she rejected him, more or less. Now, Marie had to talk some sense into Leon at this point because she knows him being he's still the same person he was from back before they got reincarnated, and this is how he would get if things didn't go his way. He'd start sulking, and Leon was pretty much pissed off. So Noelle is more or less engaged now to Loic, and after Marie talks some sense into him, she lets him know that Marie has a crush on not Marie, sorry. Marie lets him know that Noelle has a crush on him, and he's as dumb as the protagonist that he hates in those kind of games, the oblivious types. She more or less lets him know, and he decides, okay, he'll save Noelle. This time he'll, regardless if she starts kicking and screaming, he's gonna drag her away from the situation. So they decide to. He still needed a little bit more of a push because of everything that's happened, and he doesn't want to like cause this whole thing between Holfort and the Owls of the Republic. So it turns out after Marie told him all of that, the push that he needed was from the prince and the other five boys. You end up finding out that they're actually quite capable. The only reason why they're pretty dumb is if it deals with anything dealing with Marie and money. But they're actually quite capable. They're very smart. They let him know, that it's fine if he saves Noelle. That Holfoot will have his back 100%, and that he has no worries to worry about. Everything that he worried about that would happen wouldn't happen. So after all that, they decide to strike on the day of Noelle's wedding to Lloyd. So we get to the day of the wedding, and more or less, they're going through with the ceremony, and they want to name Lloyd as the guardian. But so they, well, not but they go through the whole ceremony, and Noelle, she goes through with it, but the crest doesn't appear. The guardian crest doesn't appear on Lloyd. So she does it a couple of times, and at this point, Lloyd is getting upset because he feels like she's still rejecting him after everything. Now, like I said, that Noelle at this point she's not good, more or less. She's been beaten and everything. They cover it up, makeup and everything. Um, she's she's almost at that point where it's like, you know, everything that happened to her, she's just gonna like whatever. So like at this point, he's pissed off, and he decides that if he can't have Noelle, then no one can, and he almost more or less kills her at this point. He's so upset. So Leon now breaks in, and again, Noelle gets happy again, and she's saying to herself, I shouldn't be feeling happy that he's here, but I am. So Leon breaks in, and he more or less tells them that they're stealing his bride from him. and then he reveals to everyone that he himself has the Guardian's crest. So, you know, he goes through a whole battle with them, and he ends up beating everybody, and then he reminds them that he has the Guardian's crest. Technically, he's above everybody else. Again, I told you the rankings of the crest would be the priestess, the Guardian, and then the other houses. So, in a sense, they have to listen to him because he's the Guardian. So, he starts, defeating everybody, and he ends up going up against Loic. At this point, he chops off his arm and he takes the bracelet off and he puts it on himself. So now Noel is connected to Leon. So he more or less he saves Noel. He takes her back even though she's struggling, but Loic isn't having it. So he ends up jumping into an armor from the Alsa Republic. Now this is what kind of sets the Alsa Republic aside from the other countries. Um, their armors are different in that because they have the power of the crest, it makes their armors stronger. So Loic more or less gets into an armor and he battles Leon. Now Leon puts on a show more or less. He really at this point he's pissed off and he really wants to crush them. So he puts on a show to show the difference of power between them. And he more or less Loic is just getting stronger and stronger, but as he kind of made a wish on the tree to grant him power so he could defeat Leon. Now, if you remember, there's two trees at this point. There's the sapling and the main tree that's up. So Loic is getting all his power from the tree, whereas the sapling is the one that more or less declared the priestess and the guardian, being Noel and Leon. So Loic is upset. He's in a rage, and Leon he ends up showing that Loic is not on his level. He beats him, and then at this point, he's still so obsessed with Noel, but Noel more or less sets him straight. She slaps him, and she goes along and she says, at one point I kind of maybe did like you, but you don't even really know me. Like pretty much everything that she wanted to do, he always wanted to go a step above, and she didn't like that. He always felt like she always felt like he never really saw her for who she was, and everything, he always wanted to go a step above, whereas that's not what she wanted, and he never really saw her for her. So it finally sinks into him that everything that he's done, and he more or less he calms down after that. So he ends up losing his crest, and again now, um, same thing with Pierre. He's more or less not part of the whole um, nobility anymore because again, the crest determines your noble status. He ends up losing his crest, and that's more or less how it ends for him. I know he's gonna come back in other next volumes or whatever, but again, I'm not gonna talk about that. um, so at this point, Leon has more or less gotten Noel back, and you know they more or less fall into this whole thing where they're more than friends, less than lovers. Because again, Noel doesn't want to, knowing that he has two fiancées already. She doesn't want to step into that territory, and neither does Leon. But more on that in future volumes. Like I said, I'll talk about that as more volumes come out. But at this point now, Leon more or less he saves Noel, and again, like I said, she still has a collar on. So um, at this point, at this point, more or less, he saves Noel, and for a while they go back to the normal everyday stuff. She still has the collar on. Um, Noel's sister Lelia, more or less, she realizes that Leon is kind of a threat to everything because, like I said, she was kind of on Luke's side. She was fooled by him in thinking that he was changed after everything. But Lelia, after everything that happened in this volume, she realizes that Leon is kind of a threat. She feels like he's a threat to her because again, Lelia is trying to, in a sense, she's trying to do what Marie did in that making her life better in this new reincarnation of herself. But the way she's doing it, in the way she's she's not really caring about she's Noel's sister, and she doesn't really care what happens to her as long as her life, Lelia, that is, as long as her life is okay. So she, at this time, Serge being Luis, um, Luis's adopted brother, he comes back from his adventuring, and Lelia ends up meeting with him, and she decides she knows of one other artifact that's like Luxion, and she decides that she wants to get her hands on it before Leon does, so that she can kind of be on par with him. So Serge ends up you know inviting her out, and she ends up going along with it because he's the only one in the Outer Republic that she can rely on in this sense because, like I said in the last volume, adventuring and stuff in the Outer Republic isn't really looked highly on, but he wants to be an adventurer. So he's the only one that can go with her to go get the artifact that's like Luxion. She knows she can't go by herself because again, they're in the Outer Republic. It's not like in Holfort where everybody's really into adventuring. As you saw before, Angelica, Julius and the boys. Anybody born in Holfort has a big thing for adventuring. So at this point, she teams up with Serge, and she tells her current boyfriend that don't worry about it. She's gonna be gone for a while. And this is also she can get the next artifact, so she can stand up in case anything happens with Leon. She can stand against him. So again, now we get cut back to Leon and Noel, and Luxion told them that more or less he's found a way to get rid of the collar, and yeah, he'll do it, but he just has to go grab some tools real quick from the Einhorn. So at this point, Noel and Leon are kind of just playing around, flirting, whatever. And then Angelica and Olivia ends up walking into the room. They after everything that happened in the beginning, they came back because they didn't really have time to go sightseeing and stuff and enjoy their time with Leon. So they end up coming into the room and seeing what's going on with Leon and Noel. Now, at this point, this was set up by Luxion. He knew that they were coming, but they decided against telling Leon that Olivia and Angelica was coming. So Olivia and Angelica more or less kind of put things together because remember I said he was sending them info about what's going on, and he did mention Noel in his letters. But if you remember what I said from the last volume, there were two Noels, Noel the dog and Noel the human. He was always telling them about Noel the dog, but what he didn't tell them is that Noel the dog had passed away. So now we're back at Leon's place, and in his place, in the absence of Jean at that time, Jean being Noel's owner, Noel the dog, um, her owner, after everything that happened to him in the fourth volume, he couldn't take care of her for a bit, so Leon took it upon himself to take care of Noel. So he bought like a baby bed and stuff like that for the dog to sleep in. So they end up seeing Noel with the collar around her neck, and they figure out that this is what Leon was trying to hide from them. his two timing more or less. Um, they see the baby bed and they come to the conclusion that Leon was setting up his a whole love nest over there for him and Noel. um, so more or less, Luxion and Claire backed him into that corner. Um, more or less for him and Noel. They trying, I guess they're trying to push them together. But again, we'll come back to that when further volumes release. They also talk about the tree and everything about how there's most likely um, a base under the tree. The base being from the old humans. Um, there's probably a research facility, and everything that's going on was probably like a project that the whole crest and everything was something from the past. That's pretty much where the novel ends, and that is it for volume 5. So, like I said, I will be getting back to volume 6 when it comes out in about 2 weeks or so. So, the volume 6 video, I'll probably put a pause on when I'll be going through this series at this time. I'll put a pause on it to get back into this volume 6. Like, I'll get back into it as the novels release. But for now, this is all I'm going to be talking about for Dating Sim. Next video will be on the side stories for Dating Sim, the Marie side stories and whatnot. Um, I don't know if I'll be able to put 2 videos out next week. Um, I'll see what I can do, if I can or not. If not, um, the Marie video, the side story Marie video will be probably next Friday. Um, for any of you who have realized, I've been trying to drop videos on Tuesdays and Fridays. So I don't know if I'll be able to do the video for Tuesday, but if not, then I'll be able to drop it on Friday. So that's pretty much it for this volume. Like I said, the side stories will be the next video, and then we'll be jumping into combatants will be dispatched. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any comments you want to tell, you can put them down in the comments down below. Like I said, join my Discord. Um, I'll have that all down in the description. Um, yeah, join my Discord. We can talk about novels, manga, anime. Um, you can play some games together. Um, just join my Discord. Other than that, like and subscribe, and thank you again for watching my videos. Again, I'll see you next time with the side stories for Dating Sim, and thanks again. Bye.